Have you ever met someone who always had an answer? No matter the question, no matter the situation, they believed they already knew enough. Perhaps, if we are honest with ourselves, there have been moments when we were that person. We believed our experience was enough, our knowledge was enough, our success was enough. Yet life has a quiet way of humbling every one of us. Sometimes, the greatest lesson does not come from failure. It comes from realizing that we have stopped learning. If the weight of work, the pressure of providing for your family, or the endless rush of everyday life has left your heart feeling tired, then stay with Zen Sunrise Life for a little while. Tonight, let us leave the modern world behind. Let us travel back more than 2,000 years, to the spring and autumn period. An age when kingdoms competed for power. When brilliant minds wandered from one state to another, searching not for wealth, but for wisdom. Among countless stories passed down through generations, there is one that has never lost its meaning. It is the story of a young scholar, a man who possessed extraordinary knowledge, yet almost lost the opportunity to become truly wise. The state of Lu was famous for its schools. Students traveled from distant lands hoping to learn from respected teachers. Among those students was a young man named Wei. Wei was gifted from childhood. He remembered everything he read. He could recite ancient classics word for word. He debated older scholars without fear. At only 26 years of age, people throughout the region already knew his name. Whenever guests visited the academy, the teachers proudly invited Wei to demonstrate his knowledge. He rarely disappointed them. Question after question, he answered with confidence. His words were elegant, his reasoning was sharp. Before long, praise became something he expected. Compliments became as common as the morning sunrise. Without realizing it, his confidence slowly became pride. One afternoon, after winning another debate against several traveling scholars, Wei walked through the marketplace with a smile upon his face. People greeted him with respect. Some bowed their heads. Others whispered to one another, "There goes the brightest young scholar in Lu." Those words pleased him. Deep inside, he began believing there was little left for him to learn. That evening, his teacher invited him into a quiet study. The room was simple. A wooden table, several bamboo scrolls, an oil lamp flickering gently beside the window. His elderly teacher poured 2 cups of tea. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, the old teacher smiled. "Wei, I hear many people praising your wisdom." Wei bowed respectfully. "They are too kind, master." The old teacher looked directly into his eyes. "And what do you think?" Wei hesitated only for a moment. "I believe. I have studied diligently. I still have much to learn, but compared with most scholars my age, I do not think many can teach me anything new." The room became silent. The old teacher did not criticize him. He did not argue. Instead, he slowly placed his teacup on the table. Then he spoke in a calm voice. "If that is truly what you believe, then tomorrow, you should climb Mount Qing." Wei looked surprised. "I have never heard of anyone living there." "There is an old man," the teacher replied. "Some call him a hermit, others call him a fool. But those who return from meeting him never see the world in quite the same way again." Wei smiled politely. Inside his heart, he was curious. But he was not seeking another teacher, he was seeking another victory. If this old man is truly wise, he thought, I shall enjoy our conversation. Early the next morning, before the sun had fully risen above the eastern mountains, Wei packed a small bag. He carried a bamboo scroll, a writing brush, a flask of water, and confidence far heavier than anything inside his bag. The mountain path was quiet. Morning mist floated between the pine trees. The songs of unseen birds echoed through the valley. As we climbed higher, the noise of the villages slowly disappeared. Only the sound of the wind remained. After several hours, he reached a small wooden bridge crossing a clear mountain stream. On the other side stood a tiny cottage. No grand gate, no students waiting outside, no signs of greatness. Only a weathered fence, a vegetable garden, and an old man quietly watering the plants with a wooden bucket. His clothes were plain, his hair was white, his movements were slow. He looked nothing like the famous scholars Wei had imagined. The old man glanced toward the bridge. He smiled warmly, as though he had been expecting this visitor all along. Without asking who Wei was, without asking why he had come, the old man simply said, "You have traveled a long way. You must be tired. Come. Let us share a cup of tea." Wei bowed politely. "Thank you for your hospitality." The old man nodded and led him into the cottage. Inside, everything was astonishingly simple. A small wooden table stood near an open window overlooking the valley. Shelves carved from rough timber held only a few bamboo scrolls, a worn flute, and several clay cups. Sunlight filtered through the leaves outside, painting quiet patterns across the floor. There was no sign of wealth, no display of scholarship, no collection of famous books. To Wei, the place seemed almost empty. The old man invited him to sit. Without saying another word, he placed a clay teapot over a small charcoal stove. The water slowly began to sing. Neither man spoke. Wei waited. Surely this famous hermit would begin discussing philosophy, history, or the teachings of the sages. Instead, the old man watched the steam rising from the kettle as though it were the most interesting thing in the world. Several minutes passed. Wei finally broke the silence. "My master speaks highly of you." The old man smiled. "Does he?" he said. "Those who meet you never see the world the same way again. Perhaps your master is too generous." Wei leaned forward. "I have spent many years studying the classics. I have debated scholars from many states. I have come because I wish to learn what wisdom you possess." The old man looked at him with kind eyes. "And what is wisdom?" Wei answered immediately. "To understand truth." The old man nodded. "And what is truth?" Wei spoke confidently. "It is the correct understanding of life, virtue, and human nature." Again, the old man nodded. "And how do you know your understanding is correct?" Wei smiled. "Because it agrees with the teachings of the great masters." The old man asked another question. "And if one day life teaches you something different?" Wei hesitated. "Only for a heartbeat. Then I would compare it with the classics." The old man smiled once more. "You answer quickly." Wei took pride in that observation. "I have trained myself to think without hesitation." "But do you also train yourself to listen without judgment?" The question landed softly, yet it struck deeper than any challenge Wei had faced in debate. He searched for a reply. None came immediately. The old man rose quietly. "The tea is ready." He placed a small clay cup in front of Wei. Then he lifted the teapot. Golden tea flowed gently into the cup. Wei watched silently. The cup soon became full. Yet the old man did not stop. The tea reached the rim, then spilled over. It ran onto the wooden table, across the table, finally dripping onto the floor. Wei quickly stood. "Master, the cup is already full. It cannot hold any more." The old man slowly lowered the teapot. He looked at the overflowing tea for a long moment before meeting Wei's eyes. Then he spoke so softly that it almost sounded like the wind moving through the bamboo outside. "Just like this cup, your mind has arrived already full. It is filled with certainty, filled with your own opinions, filled with the desire to prove yourself." He gently pushed the cup toward Wei. "Tell me, how can I pour anything new into a cup that refuses to become empty?" The room became silent. Wei stared at the overflowing tea. Only moments ago, he had believed the old man knew nothing remarkable. Now, one simple act had said more than 100 debates. For the first time in many years, Wei felt something unfamiliar. Not embarrassment, not defeat, but the quiet realization that perhaps he had climbed this mountain to teach, when he should have climbed it to learn. Outside, a gentle breeze moved through the bamboo forest. Each stalk bent gracefully with the wind before returning upright. The old man noticed Wei watching. He smiled. The bamboo survives every storm, not because it believes it is stronger than the wind, but because it never forgets how to bend. Wei lowered his eyes. For the first time since leaving the academy, he had no answer. The silence between them no longer felt uncomfortable. Instead, it felt like a mirror. A mirror that reflected not the knowledge he possessed, but the wisdom he lacked. The old man picked up the overflowing cup and gently emptied it onto the earth outside the cottage. Then he rinsed it with clear spring water. Holding the empty cup in both hands, he placed it back in front of Wei. "Look carefully," he said. When the cup is empty, it is ready to receive. When the mind is empty, it is ready to grow. Wei looked at the simple clay cup. Only moments ago, it had seemed ordinary. Now it carried a lesson greater than all the books he had studied. The old man poured the tea once again. This time, the tea filled the cup perfectly. Not a single drop was wasted. He slid it toward Wei. Drink. Wei lifted the warm cup with both hands. The fragrance was gentle. The taste was unlike any tea he had ever known. It was neither bitter nor sweet. Yet somehow, it calmed the restless thoughts within him. After a long silence, Wei finally spoke. Master, if my cup has been full all these years, where should I begin? The old man looked toward the distant mountains, where the evening sun painted the sky with shades of gold and crimson. Then he smiled. Tomorrow morning, you will not study books, you will not debate, you will not quote the sages, you will come with me. Wei looked surprised. To learn what? The old man picked up an empty bamboo basket resting beside the door. His eyes sparkled with quiet kindness. To learn from the mountain. Because nature has been teaching wisdom long before men ever wrote it into books. That night, Wei lay awake inside the small cottage. The words of the old man echoed through his heart. For the first time in many years, he realized that perhaps the journey to become wise begins at the very moment we admit that we still have much to learn. Outside, the wind whispered through the bamboo forest. The stream flowed without hurry, and above the silent mountain, a new moon slowly rose, as if welcoming the beginning of a journey that would change not only Wei's life, but the lives of everyone he would one day inspire. The first light of dawn crept quietly across the mountains. Mist floated above the valley like drifting silk, wrapping the forest in peaceful silence. Wei awoke before the old hermit. Or so he thought. When he stepped outside the cottage, he found the old man already sitting beneath a pine tree, watching the sunrise. He wasn't reading, he wasn't meditating, he simply watched, as though the rising sun still had something new to teach him after all these years. Wei bowed respectfully. Master, the old man smiled, did you sleep well? I slept very little. And why is that? Wei hesitated. I kept thinking about the empty cup. The old man nodded. Good. A question that keeps you awake is often more valuable than an answer that lets you sleep. Without another word, the old man stood and lifted the empty bamboo basket he had shown Wei the night before. Come, we have a long walk. Wei followed him into the forest. The mountain trail wound between towering pines and groves of bamboo that swayed gently in the morning breeze. Birdsong echoed through the valley. The air smelled of damp earth and wild herbs. For nearly an hour, neither of them spoke. At first, the silence frustrated Wei. He had expected another lesson. Another riddle. Another conversation filled with wisdom. Instead, they simply walked. Finally, unable to contain himself, Wei asked, Master, are we going somewhere important? The old man smiled without slowing his pace. We already are. Wei frowned. I mean, is there someone we are going to meet? Yes. Who? The old man pointed ahead. Life. Wei looked puzzled. The path eventually opened into a small clearing where an elderly woman struggled to gather fallen branches. Her back was bent with age. Every movement seemed painful. Without hesitation, the old hermit walked toward her. He bowed politely. Then he quietly began picking up branches and placing them into the basket. He never introduced himself. He never explained why he was helping. He simply worked. Wei stood where he was. He looked from the old woman to the hermit. Then slowly, he joined them. For nearly half an hour, the three of them gathered firewood. When the basket was full, the old woman smiled with tears in her eyes. I have nothing to give you. The hermit bowed once again. You have already given us something. She looked confused. What have I given? The opportunity to serve without expecting a reward? The old woman said nothing. She simply pressed her hands together in gratitude before slowly making her way home. As they continued walking, Wei finally spoke. Master, why didn't you tell her who you were? The old man chuckled softly. If kindness needs a witness, it is often no longer kindness. Wei lowered his head. He had spent years chasing recognition. Even his acts of generosity were often remembered because others praised them. This old man did good as naturally as a tree offered shade, without asking to be noticed, without expecting applause. The trail continued upward until they reached a narrow stream flowing over smooth stones. The water was so clear that every pebble beneath the surface could be seen. The old man knelt and filled a wooden cup. Then he stirred the bottom with a stick. Within seconds, the crystal-clear water became cloudy with mud. He handed the cup to Wei. "Drink." Wei looked inside. "I can't." "Why not?" "It's dirty." The old man smiled. "What should we do?" Wei answered immediately. "We should pour it out and collect fresh water." The old man shook his head. Instead, he gently placed the cup on a flat rock. "Sit." Wei sat beside him. Minutes passed. Neither of them touched the cup. The wind moved softly through the bamboo. Birds continued singing overhead. Slowly, almost unnoticed, the muddy water began to change. The dirt settled to the bottom. The water became clear once again. The old man lifted the cup. "Now, drink." Wei took a careful sip. The water was cool and pure. He looked at the old man with curiosity. "I understand," the hermit smiled. "Do you?" Wei nodded confidently. "The lesson is patience." The old man laughed warmly. "It is. But it is also something more." He pointed toward the cup. "When the water was disturbed, it could not reflect the sky. When your mind is disturbed, it cannot reflect truth." Wei looked silently at the still water. The surface reflected the clouds so perfectly that it seemed there were two skies, one above, one below. The old man's voice became softer. "Many people spend their lives trying to fix the world, when what truly needs settling is their own heart." Those words settled inside Wei far more deeply than he expected. He remembered every debate he had won, every argument, every moment he had hurried to prove himself right. His mind had always been moving, always defending, always judging, like muddy water that never had time to become clear. For the first time, he wondered whether wisdom was not something to collect, but something that appeared naturally, once pride and noise had settled within the heart. The old hermit stood. The sun was now high above the mountain. He picked up the bamboo basket once more. "Come, Wei. Our lesson for today has only just begun." Wei rose to his feet and followed the old hermit deeper into the forest. The path grew steeper. Ancient pine trees stretched toward the sky, their branches dancing gently in the wind. Every step seemed to carry them farther away from the noisy world Wei had always known. After another hour of walking, they reached a cliff overlooking a vast valley. The view was breathtaking. Rivers shimmered like silver ribbons beneath the morning sun. Villages appeared no larger than scattered stones. Farmers worked quietly in distant fields. Wei stood in silence. "I've never seen the world from this height," he whispered. The old man smiled. "Has the world changed? Or has your perspective changed?" Wei remained quiet. The hermit continued. "When you stood in the village, you believed your world was as large as your own knowledge. But from here, you discover how small even the greatest village truly is." He turned toward Wei. "Wisdom works the same way. The more you see, the more you realize how much remains unseen." Wei slowly lowered his head. For the first time, he no longer felt proud of everything he knew. Instead, he felt humbled by everything he did not. They remained on the cliff until the wind grew stronger. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the valley. A large branch broke from an ancient pine tree and crashed onto the trail below. Wei instinctively stepped backward. The old hermit did not move, he simply watched. "Master? Weren't you afraid?" The old man nodded. "Of course. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is remaining calm while fear passes through you." Wei looked at the fallen branch. It looked so strong. "It was," the old man replied. "But strength without flexibility often carries the seed of its own destruction." As they continued down the mountain, they came upon a young shepherd desperately trying to free a lamb trapped between two rocks. The frightened animal struggled harder with every attempt. The more it fought, the tighter it became stuck. The shepherd pulled with all his strength. Nothing changed. Wei immediately stepped forward. "Pull harder." The shepherd obeyed. The lamb cried out in fear. Still, it would not come free. The old hermit gently raised his hand. Stop. Everyone became still. The hermit knelt beside the lamb. He softly stroked its head. His voice was calm, gentle, patient. Little by little, the frightened animal stopped struggling. Its breathing slowed. Only then did the old man carefully lift one small stone beside its leg. The lamb slipped free almost effortlessly. It ran back to the shepherd, unharmed. Wei stared in amazement. I don't understand. You hardly used any strength. The old man smiled. Not every problem asks for more force. Some problems ask for less. Wei thought about every argument he had ever won, every disagreement, every debate. He had always believed victory belonged to the loudest voice, the quickest answer, the strongest opinion. Perhaps, real wisdom asked something entirely different. They continued walking until they reached a quiet meadow filled with wildflowers. The hermit placed the empty bamboo basket upon the ground. It remained empty. Wei looked at it curiously. Master, we carried this basket all morning. But we never filled it. The old man laughed softly. Are you certain? Wei looked inside. There is nothing in it. The hermit picked up the basket. Today, this basket carried kindness. It carried patience. It carried silence. It carried perspective. And most importantly, it carried the beginning of your humility. Wei looked once more into the empty basket. For the first time, he understood that not everything valuable could be seen. Some of life's greatest treasures never weigh a single ounce. The old man rested the basket on his shoulder. Then he looked toward the western sky, where dark clouds were slowly gathering above the mountains. It seems a storm is coming. Wei glanced upward. The path back to the cottage is still long. The hermit smiled peacefully. Then we should begin walking. As the first distant roll of thunder echoed across the valley, Wei had no idea that before the sun would rise again, the storm would test not his knowledge, but the transformation that had only just begun. Dark clouds gathered above the mountains with surprising speed. Only moments earlier, the valley had been bathed in golden sunlight. Now, the wind carried the scent of approaching rain. Leaves trembled upon the branches. Birds hurried back to their nests. Even the bamboo forest, which had danced so gently throughout the morning, now swayed with growing urgency. Wei looked toward the sky. We should hurry, master. The old hermit nodded. The mountain always speaks before the storm arrives. They continued along the narrow trail. Thunder rolled across the distant peaks. A cold wind swept through the valley. Within minutes, heavy rain began to fall. The mountain path became slippery. Streams overflowed their banks. Mud covered the stones beneath their feet. Wei pulled his cloak tightly around his shoulders. The rain stung his face. His boots sank deeper into the wet earth with every step. Despite his discomfort, the old hermit continued walking at the same steady pace. Never rushing, never complaining, never looking afraid. Suddenly, a frightened cry echoed through the rain. Help! Wei turned toward the sound. Far below the trail, a wooden cart had overturned beside the swollen stream. A merchant struggled desperately to keep hold of two frightened horses. Several crates had fallen into the rushing water. One wheel of the cart had become trapped between large rocks. The current grew stronger with every passing moment. Without hesitation, Wei ran downhill. The old hermit followed quietly behind. When they reached the merchant, panic filled the air. My goods! My horses! I've lost everything! The merchant pulled desperately against the reins. The horses only became more frightened. They kicked wildly. Their eyes rolled with fear. Wei immediately grabbed one of the ropes. Pull harder! The merchant obeyed. The horses resisted even more violently. The cart shifted dangerously toward the river. The old hermit raised his voice. Stop! His words were calm, yet impossible to ignore. Everyone froze. The rain continued pouring. The stream roared beside them. The hermit slowly approached the nearest horse. He spoke in a quiet voice. Easy. Easy. The frightened animal continued trembling. Instead of pulling the rope, the old man gently loosened it. He rested one hand upon the horse's neck. Slowly, its breathing began to settle. Its muscles relaxed. Within moments, The second horse followed its companion's calm. The merchant stared in disbelief. "How did you do that?" The old hermit smiled. "When fear leads, strength becomes useless." He then turned toward Wei. "Yesterday, you wished to conquer wisdom. This morning, you wish to solve every problem with knowledge. Now tell me, what does this moment require?" Wei looked around carefully. For the first time, he did not answer immediately. He observed. He listened. He noticed the broken wheel, the loose stones, the direction of the current, the frightened faces. Then he spoke quietly. "It requires calm." The old hermit nodded. "And after calm?" Wei thought again. "It requires understanding. And after understanding? It requires action." The old man's eyes shone with approval. "Good. Now, lead." Wei drew a deep breath. His heartbeat slowed. He spoke to the merchant. "Untie the horses first. You two. Move those loose stones. We'll lift the cart together when I count." No one questioned him. There was no shouting, no panic. Only calm voices working together. Within minutes, the horses stood safely away from the river. The trapped wheel was freed. With one final effort, the cart rolled back onto solid ground. The merchant fell to his knees. "You've saved everything." We smiled. "No? We simply stopped fighting the problem long enough to understand it." The old hermit quietly picked up one of the fallen crates floating near the riverbank. He handed it to the merchant. Then he continued walking, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Wei hurried after him. "Master, I finally understand." The old man glanced sideways. "Do you?" Wei smiled. "I thought wisdom meant having every answer. But today, I discovered, wisdom begins with asking the right questions." The hermit laughed warmly. "You are beginning to empty your cup." Rain continued falling. But somehow, Wei no longer noticed the cold. His heart felt lighter than it had in many years. For the first time, he understood that true wisdom did not make a man feel greater than others. It made him feel connected to them. Together, they continued along the mountain path. Neither realized that the greatest test of Wei's transformation was still waiting before the journey home would end. The storm continued through the night. Rain fell steadily upon the mountains, washing the dust from every leaf and stone. By dawn, the clouds slowly drifted away. Golden sunlight spread across the valley once more. The forest seemed brighter than before. The air was fresh. The stream beside the cottage flowed calmly, as though the storm had never existed. Wei stepped outside, carrying 2 wooden buckets. Without being asked, he walked to the spring and filled them with water. When he returned, the old hermit was already sweeping fallen leaves from the courtyard. Wei quietly placed the buckets beside him and picked up another broom. For nearly an hour, the 2 men worked together without speaking. Days earlier, Wei would have filled every silence with questions. Now, he had begun to understand that silence itself could be a teacher. When the work was finished, they sat beneath the old pine tree. The hermit poured 2 cups of tea. This time, he filled Wei's cup only halfway. Wei smiled. The old man noticed. "What makes you smile?" Wei gently lifted the cup. "A full cup leaves no room." The hermit laughed softly. "You have remembered." Wei shook his head. "No, master. I have only begun." The old man nodded with quiet satisfaction. "That is the beginning of wisdom." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The wind carried the scent of wet bamboo through the valley. Somewhere in the distance, a temple bell echoed softly among the mountains. Finally, Wei broke the silence. "When I first came here, I wanted to prove I was wise. I thought knowledge would earn me respect. I believed that if I could answer every question, I would become a great man." He lowered his eyes. "But now I realize, I spent more time speaking than listening. I spent more time correcting others than correcting myself." The hermit looked toward the rising sun. "Most people climb mountains hoping to see the world, but the wisest climb mountains to see themselves." Those words settled deep within Wei's heart. He understood now that every lesson of the past few days had not been about tea, or muddy water, or bamboo, or storms. Each lesson had quietly pointed toward the same truth: the greatest battle is not against the world. It is against the pride that lives within ourselves. After breakfast, Wei prepared to leave. He rolled up his bamboo scrolls and placed them inside his travel bag. Before he closed the bag, he paused. He took out one of the thick scrolls filled with notes from years of study. Then he gently placed it back on the shelf inside the cottage. The hermit watched with curiosity. "You are leaving your book?" Wei smiled. "I have carried these words for many years. Now, I wish to carry their meaning instead." The old man stood and walked him to the wooden bridge. Morning sunlight sparkled across the clear stream below. Before crossing, Wei bowed deeply. Far deeper than he had bowed when he first arrived. "Master, I came here searching for answers. But I am leaving with questions." The hermit's eyes shone with warmth. "Good. A man who keeps questioning himself will continue growing. A man who believes he already knows has already stopped." Wei remained bowed for a moment longer. Then he crossed the bridge. Halfway across, he turned around. The old hermit was no longer standing there. The cottage remained, the pine tree remained, the vegetable garden remained, but the old man had quietly disappeared, as though the mountain itself had been his home, and the wind had carried him away. Wei smiled. For the first time, he did not feel the need to search. Some teachers stay beside us for a lifetime. Others appear only long enough to change the direction of our lives. Years passed. Wei returned to the state of Lu. He became a respected teacher, just as many had predicted. But something about him was different. Whenever a student asked a difficult question, Wei never rushed to answer. Sometimes, he would simply smile, pour a cup of tea, and ask, "What do you think?" His students often left with fewer answers, but greater wisdom. People wondered why such a brilliant scholar had become so humble. Wei never told them about the mountain. He never spoke of the old hermit. He simply lived the lesson. Because true wisdom does not need to announce itself. It quietly reveals itself through the way a person lives. Perhaps today, your cup has also become full. Full of worries, full of stress, full of opinions, full of disappointment. Or perhaps, full of yesterday's successes. If so, do not be afraid to empty it, for every sunrise offers us another chance to begin again. Not by becoming someone else, but by becoming a little more open, a little more patient, and a little more willing to learn than we were yesterday. The ancient sages understood something that our modern world often forgets. A closed hand cannot receive a gift. A closed mind cannot receive wisdom. But an open heart can transform an ordinary life into an extraordinary journey. Life will always place mountains before us. Some we climb with our feet. Others, we climb with our character. May you always have the courage to empty your cup, so that life may continue filling it with wisdom. Thank you for spending this sunrise with Zen Sunrise Life. If this story has brought even a moment of peace to your heart, we invite you to subscribe and join us again. Together, we will continue traveling back through history. One timeless story at a time. Discovering ancient wisdom that still lights the path through modern life. Until our next sunrise, take care of your heart. Keep your cup empty, and never stop learning.